Imagine this. Last year, you were diagnosed with brain cancer. You spent the last 6 months of your life going through a lot of chemo sessions, you had brain surgery, and you even tried some experimental drugs. Sadly, none of those treatments worked, and your cancer is now terminal. There's nothing more the doctors will do for you. In fact, they've only given you 4 to 6 months to live. Now, if you live in one of the 45 states of America that don't have legalized physicians-assisted suicide, you're going to spend those last 4 to 6 months of your life bedridden and in a lot of pain. This is why I believe that the national government should legalize physicians-assisted suicide. Physicians-assisted suicide could relieve lots of people who have terminal cancer or disease conditions from a lot of pain and allow them to die with dignity. I believe that an individual should be able to end their life in a painless way. Right now in most states, it is illegal to have physicians-assisted suicide because they think that it's wrong for you to end your life. Most people who apply for physicians-assisted suicide in one of the few 5 states that actually have it all have terminal conditions where they will die. In fact, in most of those states, it's a requirement that you only have about 6 months at the most 6 months to live. So this is why I do think that it's really ridiculous that in the states that don't have it, they say you can't get it because you're going to die anyway. So what's the point if you speed it up a few months? And lots of times, without access to the legal drugs you can get from your doctors, you might consider and even attempt other ways of suicide. Now, according to the CDC, the top 3 methods used in suicides include guns, suffocation, and poisoning. And I'm pretty sure that suffocation and poisoning would be a lot more painful than going to your doctor and getting a prescription for some pain-free drugs to end your life. I also believe that no access to legal assistance will lead to illegal attempts. People who can't access one of those 5 states that have death with dignity because they don't have enough resources or time in their home state are then forced to try their own methods. In fact, one person who was actually lucky enough to be able to have enough money and time to move to one of those states was Brittany Maynard, who really made the term physicians-assisted suicide a big thing. She was diagnosed with brain cancer and it was terminal, so she became an advocate in order to legalize this option for people. She was lucky enough to be able to move from California, which at the time did not have physicians-assisted suicide legalized, but now does. But back then she had to move to Oregon in order to be able to do this, because the state said that it wasn't her choice. There's been people in modern days within the last few years who have actually been jailed because they've had family members who have been diagnosed with something terminal or who are in a lot of pain, and so they've tried their own mercy killings. One person this happened to was George and Virginia Sanders. George and Virginia were older adults who were both in their 80s. Virginia had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis about 20 to 30 years previously and had been confined to a wheelchair. It had been discovered, I think the week or so before her husband tried to use mercy killing on her, that she had gangrene in her foot, and they determined that George was no longer able to efficiently care for her, so she would have to have several of her toes removed because of the gangrene, and she would have to be sent to a hospital to be taken care of by strangers. George says that at this point in her life, she begged him to end it for her because she could not take the pain anymore, and she did not want to be cared for by somebody else. So George Sanders took a gun to his wife and he attempted to shoot her. Sadly, the bullet did not kill her right away, and she was in pain in the hospital for a couple of days before she actually passed. George was actually put on probation for a couple of years and sent to jail for a little bit and did some time there. So you see, and that was all because they didn't have access to the legalized physicians-assisted suicide. He was only trying to do what his wife wanted, even though it may not have been right. That was ultimately her choice. If they had lived in, say, Oregon or California, she could have written to her doctor and applied to receive the physician's assisted suicide. But sadly, she didn't. So you see, I believe that physician's assisted suicide is painless and leads to less suffering and illegal suicides, assisted suicides. I believe that it should be enacted because if it ever gets to that point in your life where you are going to die very soon and all you want to do is save yourself some pain, I think you should be given that choice. So this is why the national government should legalize physicians assisted suicide.